Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. The President Biden today telling the truth, coming out saying what is, calling what's going on in Ukraine genocide. And look, I'm thrilled that we've got a president saying what is. In fact, he came out and said, yes, I called it genocide because it's become clearer and clearer that Putin is just trying to wipe out the idea of even being Ukrainian, and the evidence is mounting. And look, the president of Ukraine is like, hey, true words of a true leader. POTUS calling things by their names is essential to standing up to evil. And that is what you're seeing coming out of Russia, pure, unadulterated evil. And the globe has, I hope, stays somewhat united in this as this continues. Because understand, and we've got to remain united in this. Because look, and we're going to talk about the inflation numbers. We're going to talk about how bad things are getting. And a big portion of that has to do with what's going on in Ukraine, and we'll talk about that later. But we've got to hold the line on this too. This fight for democracy, this fight for freedom, this doesn't stop at our water's edge. We don't get to say, oh well, we're okay. Screw them. If we allow Putin to win, and look, I've had people email me, go, I sure hope that Putin wins and this is over soon so we can get back to getting cheap gas. Which is really the most self-serving, selfish kind of, conservative American ideology that I can bring you. Not surprising, sadly. So good, I just wanted to throw that out first. Good on the president for coming out and calling what is, and that's a good place to start today. I'm proud of our president for standing up in that moment. Also, the sad news today is shooting in Brooklyn, a subway shooting. The reports are, last I saw, I think there were 18 people who are, 18 people who were hospitalized. 10 shot, a number of other injured. This sounds like, really a premeditated, planned out. There were undetonated devices there. You go, again, evil being evil, and why? What rationale? And there are going to be some who are going, well, we need stricter gun laws. And the part of it, probably, the guns help. But this is one of those things where, the hope, the despair, the constant misinformation, the constant fighting, where we are politically, where we are as a society, where we are with each other, this kind of at each other's throats all the time. It's not healthy. It's not helpful. And I think it's dangerous. And it starts in our political world. It starts with our quote unquote leaders. And the meanness and the hatred and the vitriol. Crazy. Now, some interesting organizing. Truckers are organizing globally. And, look, they say, what rolls downhill? And I've often said, as somebody who's been in the trucking industry over 30 years, the bottom of that hill is usually we the truck drivers. And there are people who are, finally organizing. You saw it in Canada. Well, I didn't agree with what they were organizing over, and I said, hey, there's a lot of things you could be organizing around. I'm not sure that the vaccine mandate was it. You could have just chosen not to go across the border. I would have preferred you going, hey, how do we undo all the damage that's been happening over the last 40 years to the trucking industry? They didn't. Here in this country, we had a couple of truck company owners, doing their convoy wannabe, hey, look at me events. Again, seeking attention, not really fighting for what I think were valid reasons. Again, these are people who, not real truck drivers, because these were people who some of them couldn't even find DC. I think of the one guy, Bob Bolus, coming down from Scranton, literally could not find Washington, D.C. Drove around lost and admitted, I'm lost, and turned around and went home. No self-respecting truck driver would have done that. He would have continued to be lost and driving around until he stumbled upon it at least. But I look at these drivers in Texas. They're on the southern border, the Mexican truckers that have blocked the north-southbound lanes on the Mexican side of the Far Reynosa International Bridge. They're protesting the fact that Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, has decided that they're going to do additional inspections of commercial vehicles. Now, you've got the federal government that has traditionally and has historically done the inspections at the border. From what I'm now reading, the stories that I'm seeing, that this is now the state of Texas who are now, we're going to do them too. And what has happened is, things are just backing up well beyond the normal kind of back at the block up. And what they're saying is, look, the produce, the broccoli, the peppers, the strawberries, all the stuff that come across the borders. Well, not doing well. Commerce, fifth day in a row, miles long backup, people waiting in line days. And as you know, truck drivers, if the wheel's not turning, they're not getting paid. And what happens is if you're late in a lot of these things, they end up canceling the order halfway through. So you just drove somewhere for no freaking reason. So truck drivers are going, nope. We didn't get there on time. They canceled the order. We just made the trip for nothing. We ate all the costs. We're not doing it anymore. And now they're saying, not doing it. This, to me, one of those things that you go, yeah, this seems like a good reason to stand up and fight back, and a good reason to have one of these blockades. Now, personally, I'm not a huge fan of cross-border trucking. I think the way we used to do it in the old days was the right way. You had transfer sites where Mexican trucks came to the border, they dropped it, American truck drivers picked it up there, and they took it on. You didn't have these people, you didn't have folks crossing the border going wherever they wanted to go. But hey, you never hear any of the right wing screaming about that. Because, well, we get cheap labor, right? That's really what that's about. This is, again, one of those moments where there's some good organizing. Are you going to hear, and this is where, are you going to hear the right wing who's all on the trucker convoy for freedom? Are you going to hear them backing these truck drivers? Of course not. Because these people are talking about how their economic freedom is being impacted, how their lives are being impacted, how the job is being held up by draconian conservative politicians who, are just trying to make a point. And look, you could inspect every vehicle. And look, if that's what you want to do, I'm okay with it. But don't be surprised if you can't get your produce across. Don't be surprised if this is what happens. Now, we're supposed to have a system that checks this stuff through. We're supposed to have a system that pre-certifies loads. We're supposed to do all that stuff. And the governor of Texas, again, doing what he's trying to do to usurp his federal powers, is making life pretty interesting. So here's the weird part. So now that produce isn't getting across the border, because again, we're talking about inflation being at almost record highs, now highest it's been since 1981. How much is produce going to go up because of these policies? And is that part of the plan? What's going on in Ukraine is raising gas prices. What's going on at ExxonMobil and Shell and all of these things? They're not increasing production. Why? Because they want prices high. It's part of the plan. When the Business Roundtable sits down and they talk about, hey, prices are going up. That's good for our bottom line. We get to fatten our profits. This causing a disruption in our supply chain. Going to the supermarket, buying strawberries or buying, avocados or lettuce or whatever produce is coming across the border. Now, because of the shortage caused by this disruption, now because this stuff is going to go bad sitting on trucks, it's going to get that much more expensive, which is going to do what? It's going to raise the price of it. And what's that going to do? It's going to cause more inflation. And who does that benefit? It benefits Republicans. And there's part of me that goes, and I hate to sound conspiratorial, because I don't believe the Business Roundtable sits down and goes, how can we hurt Joe Biden? I don't believe that's the main goal. I don't think hey, let's have a meeting, how we can screw the Democrats. I'm not in that vein. I'm in the spot where they sit down and go, hey, how can we not let this crisis go to waste? How can we line our pockets just a little bit more? How can we make bigger profits this quarter so we can get bigger bonuses? How can we maximize our products? How can we leverage this moment to maximize shareholder wealth? Good corporate jargon. How can we make sure that we get that dividend out at the end of the quarter so we can cash in and get our stock options and be able to cash in and line our pockets? That I fully believe. And if there is the added bonus that this hurts the Democrats and hurts Joe Biden, because remember, Joe Biden's talking about, hey, workers should share in those profits. See, this is where the connection is. This is where corporate America is going, wait a second, those profits are ours, damn it. We shouldn't have to share. You want us to share in our windfall? You want us to share in our obscene profits? You want us to share? This is ours. We don't share. Haven't you seen the last 45 years? Our compensation's gone up nearly 1,000%. Those little peon workers, only 12%. Haven't you seen that? Haven't you seen our track record? We don't share. And this is where we are. So I don't want to sound conspiratorial because it isn't a conspiracy. They're literally doing this right out in the open. So there's no backroom deals going on. There's no smoke-filled rooms. They're doing it right out in front of us. And in fact, you heard, last week on the show where we play the Green News, where they had the call from the oil people going, no, we're not going to ramp up production. We like the prices high because we're fattening the bottom line. More for us to divvy out amongst us. The heck with those working stiffs. And they're too stupid to know we're doing it to them. They're going to blame Joe Biden. They got a bunch of morons running around with stickers going, Joe Biden did this, when it was really the oil executives. But hey, never mind, because we can blame it on Joe Biden. Because everything, of course, Joe Biden's fault. The cost of the strawberries now going to be Joe Biden's fault, even though they're rotting at the border because of Greg Abbott. And this is where you go, is this a conspiracy? Or is this just, opportunism? And I go back to, I don't like to talk conspiratorial, good old American fashion opportunism. That's what we're seeing. And I see it across the board. So our inflation problems, we've got some supply chain issues. We got supply chain issues that we've never had in our lifetime. You shut an economy down, you don't get to flip the switch and everything back to normal. In corporate America, they know, never let a good crisis go to waste because that you can profit off of. And they are, because you don't hear any CEOs crying poverty, do you? You don't hear any companies going, oh, we're so broke. We're sitting on all this surplus product that we can't seem to get rid of. No, they're jacking up their prices. And they're lining their pockets. Because it's what they do. It's what they do. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, or give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Remember, if you're just joining us, grab the podcast. Make sure you never miss a moment of the program. Always there, always available. And we also throw some extra stuff in as well that you don't want to miss. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Got the talk. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. You know, generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
You know, we've been talking about all the union organizing and all the activity going on around workers saying, you know, we've had enough. The great reshuffle, the great resignation, people demanding better wages, better hours, better conditions. And it's an exciting time because people are saying, you know what, had enough of the way things used to be, want better. And I looked to California, and I've been waiting for this for a while. California, this is a good thing. California is trying to become the first state in the country to go to a 4-day work week. And not 4 10-hour days, none of that nonsense, but to actually go to a 32-hour work week. 4 8-hour days at the same pay. Now this is and over giving overtime after 32 hours a week. Now this isn't like in France where it's 35 hours and no overtime. This is 32 hours, and you want to work people 100 hours, you're paying overtime after 32. We haven't had a major change to our labor law like this. Oh, what was that? 1935 was the Fair Labor Standards Act? 1938? 1938. It was the Fair Labor Standards Act. We haven't had a change since then. And very few of us were alive back then. Time for an update. Time to push for better. And this is where the idea of having, if we could do stuff like this is where automation wouldn't be a scary thing. If we had a functional economy, if we had an economy that really did keep up with if productivity gains were shared across the economy, if workers actually shared in the wealth that their labor created, you know, if we actually had that relationship, that meritocracy that we were, at least my generation was told that existed, that if you worked hard, you played by the rules, you got ahead. I don't know that they tell younger kids that anymore. I don't believe they tell them. I think they know better. I think they're smarter than we were. But But that meritocracy did exist from the end of World War II to the mid to late 70s, where you saw productivity gains going up and wages kept right with it. As Dean Baker here said recently, had that marriage continued from the middle 70s till today, even the late 60s till today, the minimum wage would be over $27 an hour. Workers would be getting a fair share of the wealth that they're creating. And you go, well, where'd that money go? Well, we know where that extra $20 went, because the minimum wage hasn't increased in more than 12 years, nearly 13. That went to creating the largest wealth class in the history of civilization. We see them. There are billionaires. There are a couple of thousand billionaires that we've got. We created them through lower wages, through less benefits, through less retirement security, less opportunity for our children, less health security, less infrastructural improvement, less educational opportunities, more debt for generations. We've sacrificed, we've tightened the belt so that we could have these handful of billionaires. And good for us for doing that. Don't you feel proud? Aren't they national treasures? Thank goodness we've got Jeff Bezos and the Musk guy. I'm being facetious if you don't catch the sarcasm. But had that relationship continued, it'd be $27 an hour. And I don't think we'd be afraid of automation. I think if we shared in the productive gains, and if productivity was actually shared and we had an economy that was truly functional, we would be encouraging productivity increases, because it would make all of our lives better. We would be talking about shorter work weeks and having better life-work balance and doing more things that we want, having better outcomes for life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, that stuff. But the sad reality is, anytime there's a technological advancement in the workplace, it's the workers who get screwed, and one or two people at the top who, become wildly wealthy. And then we're sold this idea that we can, one of us can be that guy. It's kind of the Hunger Games, if you will. And the sad reality is the vast majority of us are never going to be that guy. As a friend of mine says, his retirement security is playing the lottery twice a week. He's hoping one day he hits the lottery so he can retire, but he doubts he ever will. He's going to keep playing until the day he dies. That's not how an economy should work. An economy should work by, as you participate, everyone gets better off. The harder you work, the more you put into it, the more you get out of it, the more everyone gets out of it. The smarter we get, the smarter we work, the better off we all are. If we had a functional economy, that's how it would work. Now, understand, the economy works exactly as it's supposed to for wealthy people. Exactly for the people who have designed it, it works perfectly. Desperate workers doing desperate work, pitted against each other to hold on to the crumbs and hold on to what little they have. Like those miners in West Virginia who were threatening me on the side of a road with their sidearms, losing their health care, losing their pensions, losing their livelihoods, but holding on with dear life because it's all we've got. If we had a functional economy, they wouldn't believe that. They'd say, okay, one technology goes, another comes, we're going to all be okay because we're all sharing in the fruits of this technology. If we had a functional economy. Sadly, we don't. But we could if we had sane, rational policy. And again, for me, it comes back down to policy. It comes back down to who we vote for, who we put into office, who we get behind. Just my thoughts. Love to hear yours. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1937. That was the day the United States Supreme Court decided the case National Labor Relations Board versus Jones and Laughlin Steel Corporation. This case declared that the National Labor Relations Act of 1935 was indeed constitutional. Also known as the Wagner Act, it is a key statute that provides the legal basis for private sector workers to organize, collectively bargain, and to go on strike. Jones and Laughlin Steel, the fourth largest steel producer in the country at the time, had fired several workers trying to organize with the Steelworkers Organizing Committee in Aliquippa, Pennsylvania in 1935. The NLRB had originally ruled against the company and ordered the workers reinstated with full back pay. But J&L refused, arguing that the act was unconstitutional on the basis that the federal government did not have the right to regulate interstate commerce. In a 5-4 decision, the court ruled that labor management disputes did affect interstate commerce and thus were subject to federal regulations. Historian James Pope notes that the statute was upheld only after a massive wave of worker militancy, punctuated by the spectacular 6-week sit-down strike at General Motor plants in Flint, Michigan, demonstrated what might have happened if the court decided the case differently. And in his book, The Last Great Strike, Little Steel, the CIO, and the Struggle for Labor Rights in New Deal America, legal scholar Ahmed White adds that the case was decided only after 2 years of legal uncertainty. Before Jones and Laughlin was decided, CIO unions were already negotiating and signing collective bargaining agreements. Ruling the Wagner Act constitutional has nonetheless benefited millions of workers for decades. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
The opposite of courage is not cowardice, it's conformity. And right there's the problem with the big money establishment that now controls the National Democratic Party. This group certainly wants Democrats to be the majority party, but for what purpose? Based on the policies they actually push, they seek progress without change, only offering policy tweaks that conform to the existing corporate structure. Their idea of change is what near beer is to beer, only not so satisfying. Worse, when grassroots progressives put real FDR-style Big D Democratic ideas on the national agenda, the Dem hierarchy turns into a bunch of fraidy-cat Democrats, muling that a living wage law, health care for all, breaking up monopoly power, child care, strengthening unions, and other fundamental changes are too extreme. Such boldness, they cry, will frighten voters. They are, of course, wrong and politically inept. For such direct benefit, we're on your side changes in today's corporate-run system are the Democrats' most popular proposals. Polls confirm that this is especially true among working-class voters in manufacturing towns where Democrats have been getting creamed. Surveys by a group called American Family Voices show that these people don't think the party is too socialist or too woke, but too meek, too corporate, and missing in action. After all, they've seen CEOs move their decent-paying jobs out. They've watched monopolies and Wall Street squeeze the lifeblood out of family farm opportunities. They've witnessed Amazon and Walmart eating Main Street alive. Where, they ask, is the Democratic Party that once stood for us? These people actually despise big corporations, love unions, and yearn for a party that'll join them in battling the bastards. This is Jim Hightower saying, the question they have for Democrats is basic. Do you just intend to hold office or use it?
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, Paul Krugman had an interesting article here recently that, he should have written 20 years ago. This idea that the line that he used, he said there has been a longstanding belief among Western elites that commerce is good for peace and vice versa. And then we've been sold this line that, countries that trade with each other don't war with each other. And we've believed and we've been sold this line that, we need global trade. And the more we intertwine our economy and the more dependent we become on each other, the less likely this will lead to global war. Well, I think we're seeing all of that unwind in ways that, I've said for years just doesn't make a lot of sense. And in fact, I argued even back years ago, that being this intertwined makes us turn a blind eye to some really bad abuses. And it's allowed Putin to get to the point where he's at now, which is, I think we're so far down this road. And I hope we learn this lesson. I hope we start pushing back in ways, not just with Russia, but China especially. And here to share some thoughts on Krugman's piece and maybe where we go globally in this in the future. I've asked our good friend Scott Paul to come share some thoughts with us. Scott is the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing, AmericanManufacturing.org, their website. Scott, thanks for taking some time for us.
Hey, Rick, it is super great to be with you tonight.
So, I'm looking at this Krugman piece, and he's not wrong. I mean, this is something that I've been saying for a while. I get it on a piece of paper. On paper it sounds like a great idea. Hey, if we're dependent on each other, we're going to have common interests. We're not going to want to break those common interests. But it also makes us, turn a blind eye. Everyone's got a family member that does some bad things that we just go, let it go. We'll overlook that for now. And I think that's what's gotten us into kind of a mess we're in.
Yeah, it's. I thought it was really interesting, and of course, Krugman is a wonky guy. I mean, he won a Nobel Prize for economics, actually for trade theory. Just a couple of decades ago, and he's a total free trade guy. He's a very progressive guy, but he's totally free trade, and I think he kind of believed this idea as well. And one of the interesting things he does in this piece is looks back at history as how often this has been wrong and the miscalculations that have resulted from it. For instance, the Confederates thinking that the British would take their side in the Civil War because they had a dependence on Southern cotton, for example, or the very widespread belief that something like World War I could never happen because trade was growing and expanding, and there was more interdependence than ever in the days leading up to World War I. Or Putin, who miscalculated and thought that Europe would go soft on him because they're so dependent, particularly on energy, and obviously. Energy is one of the last things that they're unwinding. There's no doubt about that, but they are. And Germany taking a very tough line against Russia and its invasion of Ukraine. And then that brings us to kind of like the great unknown, which is China. And for 2 decades, we've been sold this idea in the United States that having this trade with China is going to help to open China. I think people have pretty much given up on that, Rick. Because they've tried that hasn't happened. And now there's even a lot of doubt, I think, about whether all this trade won't prevent China from being adversarial on issues like Taiwan. They certainly are adversarial with respect to Russia, with our interests. And so it's time that we disconnect this idea that trade begets peace, or economic independence, interdependence somehow is superior in protecting global norms, because it also takes democracy. It takes a lot of different things that go along with this, but one doesn't necessarily lead to the other.
Yeah, I'm of the mindset you trade where you can, but there are national interests that have to come first, and we've not thought of those in a long time, and this is something that I've talked about for a very long time, and we've had these conversations over the years. I think first and foremost, you take care of. We used to understand this. Charity begins at home. That old saying. You take care of your home front first, right, and then you reach out and you help where you can. I think we need to start thinking that way again. You build your manufacturing, you build what you need here, you take care of what you need, you take care of domestic production for domestic consumption, and then you deal with all of the other things. And I think that's where we have to really rethink all of the things that we've been sold over the years. All of the neoliberal thoughts that were drilled into our heads politically. We need a mass purging kind of a moment, and I'm hopeful because I do see on the left especially, and some on the right, there's some common ground here where
Yeah.
there's thought here. And I look at someone like Tim Ryan, who is taking kind of a beating over saying that China is an adversary. It's not racist to say that the Chinese Communist government is an adversary. They are. I'm not saying that Chinese people are horrible people. I'm saying the Chinese system, the Chinese Communist Party. I'm saying the country that we're trading with, that is taking advantage, that is cheating us at every single turn. That is a problem. They are an adversary, and that has to be dealt with.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I thought the criticism that was leveled at Congressman Ryan for his campaign ad with respect to China was completely unfounded. And it was not, I believe me, I've been around long enough, Rick, to see when politicians are using this kind of stuff as dog whistles. And Donald Trump was a dog whistler. Okay. He was. I mean, he obviously had a trade position that was closer to ours than most politicians, even among Democrats at the time. But he was a dog whistler, and he did it with immigration, and he did it a little bit with trade and the way in which he approached COVID-19 and all of that other stuff too, right? And so, what differentiates someone like Donald Trump from Tim Ryan is that Tim Ryan stands up against hate crimes and hate speech against Asian Americans and against Chinese nationals. Full stop. He does. And so when he gets criticized by democratic organizations, by the way, that are looking out in theory for Asian Americans, I think it's very wrongheaded, and it's very dangerous to suggest that you cannot criticize another government, the actions of another government, particularly when those actions are hurting not only workers in America or some of our other values, but also its own citizens who do not have a voice in changing their government and who cannot speak out at all, and who cannot speak out not only in China, but also here. And they face repercussions for all of that. And so I think that Ryan should be commended for the way in which that he has approached this. And I'm going to encourage every person running for office, Democratic and Republican, to take a tough stance on the government of China, because that is exactly what we need to do, and they should not back down.
And I would also throw in there, take a tough stance on the CEOs of companies in this country who raced over there to seek cheap exploitable labor, to seek lax environmental regulations so they could fatten their bottom line and abandon the workers in this country. I think that still has to be something that is dealt with, that is discussed, and that someone's held accountable. Look, we've talked about this, and I'm still bitter about it. There are 70,000 factories of more than 500 employees that have left this country. We didn't lose them. We know exactly where most of them went. And those are 70,000 communities across this country that are broken. Their identities are gone. Their workers are thrown to the curb. And look, we know what filled the void of those factories: despair, drug abuse, broken families, all kinds of desperation. That still needs to be dealt with. It still needs to be healed. And I think we have to address that on a certain level, and nobody should get a pass. Now, you blame who you got to blame over in China, but it's got to be done here too, I think.
Yeah, I agree. It's not either or. It's not either the actions of the Chinese government or the actions of U.S. multinational corporations, and also the enablers from the political class here in the United States. It's both. It's absolutely both, because China's government laid the groundwork for a lot of this, and our companies were eager to rush in, and they were enabled by a generation of American politicians, Democratic and Republican, who many of whom probably benefited from a financial political perspective from the stances that they took on all of this stuff. And we have enough evidence now to know that it's not working for us. It's not working for our environment. It's not working for our workers or communities. It's not working for our national security. And so we do need a different approach. And I'm glad that Ryan is lifting up these issues. And yeah, you can, I agree. You cannot just criticize the Chinese Communist Party without also criticizing the actions of the global companies, particularly the US based global companies who are complicit in all of this shifting of jobs from communities in the United States to China and other countries.
You listen to the Rick Smith Show here with Scott Paul. Scott's the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. AmericanManufacturing.org is their website. It's where you can check out the amazing work that they do. We'll get links out on social media how you can check that out. If you've got a thought, question, comment, give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Now, I understand you testified here recently in front of, what was it, the Department of Homeland Security, UFLPA public hearing. I guess it was last week sometime.
Yeah.
You're talking about the use of the Uyghur labor and all of that. Walk me through what the testimony was.
Yeah, so this was very important because I mean, just to make sure your listeners have the full account here. The Uyghur population are these ethnic Muslims in Western China in the Xinjiang province. It is well documented now that China is trying to eviscerate this culture, have some of them in the equivalent of concentration camps where they are forced to work for contractors that some of whom do business with U.S. companies or Chinese companies that sell products in the United States. The Trump administration declared what was happening a genocide. The Biden administration agrees. Some other Western countries agree as well. Congress, in one of the rare acts of bipartisanship, passed a bill to say you cannot bring any product coming from this region into the United States unless you can first absolutely certify that it is not made with slave labor. And this law goes into effect basically the first day of summer, June 21st. And there were companies who were saying, well, we need more time. we need more time, or give us the benefit of the doubt here about our supply chains. Just, trust us.
Yeah, we've been doing that, Scott. We've been trusting you, and we've been trusting them. What did it get us?
Right. Rather than seizing our goods at the border and forcing us to certify that every single one of those goods in that cargo container were not made with forced labor, just give us the benefit of the doubt, basically. And there were many others, including me and the labor movement and researchers who have really looked at this stuff, and human rights groups, including many, I will say, Jewish human rights groups who can easily draw links between what they see happening here and what they saw happening in Germany in the 1930s and early 1940s, who said, no, enforce the law and ensure that these companies are responsibly sourcing. And the odds are very, very good that if they are sourcing from this particular region, that there is a reasonable chance that there could be products made with slave labor in those components. And so it was fascinating to see this because, of course, Rick, they said, look, we oppose all of the human rights violations. We condemn all of that. We want to be partners with you, but we need some time to do this. And we're saying, no, you should have known. You should have known a long time ago that you can't do this. And why did you have a supply chain that was using forced labor in the first place? What was, what's wrong with you?
Well, no, Scott, no, hold on. No, not what's wrong with you. That's why they went. This is the premise that I start with. That is the heroin for CEOs. Cheap labor, exploitable regulations, lax environmental policy. That's heroin to a CEO because that means more profit for them. That's the reason they go to places like that. So this shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. I guess I should pose this as a question. Should this be a surprise to anyone, given the fact that this is going to fatten the bottom lines?
You're right. On one level, it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody because they're looking out for profit margins and all of that. But I think here's the particularly disappointing thing about this is that it is, I mean, it is well documented what is happening here. There's really no disputing that, even though obviously the Chinese government disputes it. These companies know it. They say they're for, sustainability, and they say they're for human rights here at home and abroad, and they have all this happy talk about it, but it's exactly that. It is rhetoric. It is not matched by their actions, and so you have people from the solar panel industry basically saying, this is going to set back solar if we're not able to source here, because this is where a lot of the polysilicon comes from. So you know what? You don't want to build a new form of energy in the United States on the backs of slave labor. What the hell is wrong with you?
Exactly. So what you're telling me is we can't save the planet if we can't abuse people for your profit. Is that the calculus? Is that how I'm supposed to get from here to there? That we can't save humanity unless I allow you to abuse people. I don't accept that premise.
Yeah, it had me. I mean, again, I think the optimistic me was glad that so many human rights groups, so many others were very forceful in their calls on this. And then when this bill passed, it was overwhelming, Rick. I mean, it was like, I think there were maybe one or two no votes in the entire House and Senate combined on this. That rarely happens. Yeah. And so we just got to make sure it's done the right way, and that the Department of Homeland Security takes care of this, because this is a serious issue. And China is trying to erase this culture. And it's stunning. It is stunning. We cannot stand by and let this happen.
I'm with you. Scott, I appreciate the time, the thoughts. Great work. I hope folks will take a look at the incredible work you do there. AmericanManufacturing.org, the website. Scott Paul, I appreciate the time.
Rick, thanks so much. Have a great night.
Good stuff. Our good friend Scott Paul. Make sure, like I said, check out the website, AmericanManufacturing.org. We'll get links out. Scott is the president there of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. Right back after this, your thoughts, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. You're just joining us. Make sure you grab the podcast. Never miss a second of the program. Wherever you get your podcast, iTunes to iHeart, Podbean to Stitcher, anywhere in between. We're all there and everywhere in between. Back after this. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1934. That was the day that workers at the Toledo Auto Light Factory decided to go on strike. The company made electric starters for the auto giants in nearby Detroit. The punishing effects of the Great Depression had hit the auto industry hard. Unemployment in the industrial city of Toledo soared. At the auto light plant, workers faced increased scrutiny from their bosses, who knew hundreds of eager-to-work laborers stood at the ready just outside the plant's gate, ready to take the job of anyone who dared to complain. Philip Croth and Margaret Beagle recalled the working conditions in an oral history of the strike, saying, "Under observation, even into the toilets, workers found themselves sneaking a bite to eat or a puff of a cigarette, aware that they would be fired if discovered." One of the most hated practices by management was known as the bench. Workers were told to sit on a bench where they would wait until they were needed to perform a job. Once that job ended, they went back to the bench, being paid for only the time spent while working. Faced with such conditions, the workers had had enough and went out on strike. The company won an injunction that allowed only 25 workers to picket at any one location. But then something happened that the company had not expected. The Lucas County Unemployment League stood up with the picketers. Instead of taking the jobs of those on strike, the unemployed members of the league rallied to the picket lines in defiance of the injunction. In late May, picketers and the National Guard clashed in what became known as the Battle of Toledo. Finally, on June 2nd, the strike was settled. The workers had won a 5% raise and union recognition. Today's Labor History in 2 brought to you in memory of Carol Hillman, a passionate friend of workers and volunteer of the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
You know, as I said, the reality is, it's like heroin. Cheap labor and lax environmental regulations, more profit for corporate America. And look, this is, you may go, hey, this sounds like it's something new. It's not. They've been getting away with this for years. It was the whole reason to open up China. They say, oh, we're going to have consumers. No, they on pennies a day? No, that's not the reason they opened it up. They opened it up for cheap labor. That was what it was for. Let's go to the phone lines. Got Alice on line 2. Alice, how are we doing today?
We're doing. How about you?
I am great. What's on your mind?
Well, I wanted to chime in here. I'm a little bit older than you. So back when I was a kid, most of the stuff was still made in America, but there were a lot of like really cheap items, and instead of China, it was Taiwan.
Yep.
Taiwan and Hong Kong back then. And then when Nixon got all buddy-buddy with China, opened it up, then everyone started, the corporations were like, ooh. And then when Reagan came into power, the next thing you know, everybody was going overseas to, open up the businesses over there. And it just boggles my mind that these people cannot see this. And I am so tired of reading op-eds in the Washington Post and of Biden did this and Biden did that, and it's his fault that, the prices are so high. And I just keep thinking to myself, you are the most ignorant bunch of people that are supposed to be educated at Harvard and Yale and whatnot that I've ever seen in my life. So my conclusion is that do not send your children to the Ivy League schools because apparently they're all idiots.
I do not disagree. I
mean, it's ridiculous, and all they have to do, my goodness, is pay attention. It's gotten out of hand, but what are you going to do?
What I would argue back, though, is the economy is working perfectly for them. They learn a different set of values than the rest of us. I think the economy is working perfectly for the people who know how it's supposed to work, and it's supposed to work for them much differently than it works for us. It's supposed to work exactly the way they're taught it's supposed to work. Keep us desperate, keep us pliable, keep us angry and pitted against one another, and never grabbing up the pitchforks to come after them. And look how wonderfully it's working, because we're still at each other's throats, Alice.
Oh, I would not disagree with you. I keep saying their wet dream is to go back to the Middle Ages when there were peasants. And let's bring back workhouses and poorhouses. But you have a good evening.
Thank you, Alice. Appreciate it. No, look, they're moving us, and I talk about this all the time. They're moving us back to the Lochner era, where there'll be no labor laws, there'll be no maximum hour, no minimum wage, no safe working condition laws. There'll be, if you're hungry enough and desperate enough to work in deplorable conditions for poverty wages, that's your freedom. It's your freedom. The old liberty of contract nonsense. Because you ask the Gorsuches, you ask the Kavanaughs, they believe that the case that overturned the Lochner era, they believe that the West Coast versus Parrish was wrongly decided. They believe that whole thing was bad. Giving workers rights, horrible. Made them uppity. Made them want, stuff. Bad for profits. Yeah, this is where they want to take us back to, folks. Alice is not wrong. Listen to Alice. It's that simple. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Make sure you grab the podcast if you missed any of the program. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit about inflation. Again, highest ever. We're told to be my inbox full of people going, hey, I can tell you how bad inflation is. I go, you got any solutions? Well, no, I'm just going to complain. Come to me when you've got some solutions. Right back.
Methane increased a record amount for the second year in a row.
NOAA reports a disturbing increase in climate warming methane.
Americans buying a new vehicle will spend less on gas than they would have if we hadn't taken this step.
Biden administration tightens mileage standards for cars and trucks. Boston and L.A. shift to electric buses, plus
they've been found in ocean and drinking water, in soil and air and food, but this is the first time they've been detected in living lungs.
Microplastic pollution now found in humans, too.
Everything is awesome. All of those stories and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Scientists have found microplastics in people's blood for the first time. So note to self, when disposing of large amounts of blood, remember to separate it into the right bins.
Helpful advice. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, I hate to say it, but does not sound like there's a whole lot of good news in today's Green News Report.
Well, there's a little bit, so wait for it.
Oh, I'm waiting.
First up, global atmospheric levels of the extremely potent climate-warming gas methane increased by a record amount in 2021. That's according to NOAA, and it increased for the second year in a row. Methane matters because it is a big contributor to man-made climate change. It's about 25 times more powerful at trapping heat than carbon dioxide on short timescales. NOAA scientists speculate that the spike may be from nature. Wetlands contain decaying organic matter, which releases methane, but more intense downpours, turbocharged by global warming, can accelerate that release. That concerns researchers because it could signal a potential feedback loop of a naturally driven cycle that gets worse as the climate warms.
And there's nothing we can do about that. The climate warms, it releases more methane, and it makes everything warmer still.
Exactly.
Fantastic.
However, studies do show that cuts to human-driven methane emissions from the fossil fuel and agriculture industries would have big benefits, reducing near-term global warming. NOAA's announcement came just days after UN scientists warned world governments are not acting fast enough to cut emissions to avoid dangerous climate impacts.
So that's not the good news, right?
Nope. In energy geopolitics, Japan has joined the EU and the U.S. to target Russia's energy sector for the first time. Japan will ban Russian coal imports that fund Russia's war in Ukraine. But like several EU countries, Japan has resisted calls from Ukraine to ban Russian oil and gas altogether. As environmental journalist Peter Sinclair of Climate Crocs notes, quote, "No one fights over sunlight and wind. As long as we are dependent on fossil fuels, autocrats like Vladimir Putin will lust for oil fields like those in eastern Ukraine and use fossil gas as a weapon against democracy."
Good point.
In other news, plastic pollution is pervasive around the entire planet, from the top of Mount Everest to the deepest oceans, and now in people.
That is definitely not the good news.
First, a small study in the Netherlands found tiny pieces of microplastics in the blood of nearly 80% of the people tested, demonstrating that the particles can travel around the body and may lodge in organs.
Good God.
A second study found microplastics deep in the lungs of living people for the first time. The scientists said more research is needed to understand the health consequences of microplastics found in humans, but they are concerned because laboratory studies have shown microplastics can cause damage to human cells. But here's the good news.
Okay.
The Biden Department of Transportation has reversed a Trump rollback of fuel efficiency standards for cars, minivans, SUVs, and pickup trucks. The new standards ratchet up so that by 2026, new vehicles sold in the United States will average 49 miles per gallon, saving consumers billions in fuel costs.
That is if those standards are allowed to move forward in 2026 by President Trump.
In Boston...
Shook you up a little, did I?
In Boston, Democratic Mayor Michelle Wu, the first woman and the first person of color to serve in that city's top office, announced that Boston will shift its entire fleet to non-polluting all-electric vehicles, starting with school buses, to cut the city's emissions and its air pollution.
There's some good news.
This will be a big step forward in making sure that we are delivering the clean air, public health, opportunity, the right start and end to your day coming to and from the Boston Public Schools.
Very nice. Are they going to add seatbelts to the school buses while they're at it?
Good question.
Thank you.
And finally, the Los Angeles City Council has voted unanimously to electrify the city's entire fleet of more than 10,000 vehicles as part of its plan to become the first U.S. city to rely on zero-carbon energy by 2035. The plan includes creating jobs by greatly expanding the city's EV charging network.
That is good news. 10,000 vehicles?
At least.
All right. Well, if we're doing it, everyone else in the country can too. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the big story today, obviously the inflation numbers. And look, the White House was preparing us for what was going to be bad numbers. They are what they are. There's no getting around inflation is a problem. There's no getting around the reality that it is going to be with us for a bit. And there's no getting around that what's going on in Russia and in Ukraine is a major driver in this. But they're saying that inflation has risen the most since the massive increase in 1981 that I remember. CPI jumped 8.5%. And again, most of that has to do with our cost of energy. It is what it is. And here to share some thoughts on, well, what we can do and why we're seeing this, I've asked our good friend Mateus Vernango to come talk with us. Mateus is a professor of economics at Bucknell University. Mateus, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, thank you for having me, Ray.
So, I'm looking at this report and I'm going, well, I'm not surprised by it. It's high, it's bad. My email box is full of people going, no, it's horrible, it's the worst ever, and it's all Joe Biden's fault. Is this all Joe Biden's fault?
Well, I mean, the inflation acceleration clearly, it started, higher numbers last year, no doubt. So if you're talking the coincidence that it happened during Joe Biden's, administration, no doubt. The reasons for this were before the war that you were referring to, as we have talked in previous shows. It was the pandemic. The pandemic generated a lot of problems on the supply side, problems at the ports, problems with shipment, transportation issues, lack of chips for the cars because people were buying things for other things and they didn't have the supplies, or didn't think ahead. And all of those things led, price of cars were very high, new and used and whatnot. That in this report, I should say, there's deflation. The price of new cars and used cars went down. But, the thing is that the price of oil, really went through the roof. And, and there is no, if you look at, I'm not an expert in foreign policy, but things don't look good. And so, as you said, this is probably going to be with us for a while. So yes, it's the vast majority of the increase in prices now is associated to the price of energy. The price of energy enters in everything. That's the other thing that it's important to understand and remember. The 1970s, that late 70s, early 80s, as you were saying, is that it enters in everything. It's kind of inevitable. Inflation is going to be with us for a while. So the best thing we can do, I would say, not to control inflation. The best thing we can do is make sure that workers are and unions are strong enough so that wages follow inflation. Inflation is always bad because it's workers that tend to be hurt the most by inflation, because wages tend to be lagging for the most part. So that's the part that it's I think problematic.
Is there anything that Biden or any president can do in this moment? I mean, because look, I think as you point out, is it a coincidence that he's president now? I think it's all coincidental. I think this is part of whoever the president was going to be, whether this was Donald Trump, whether this was Joe Biden, whether this was Bernie Sanders. I don't care who it was. We were going to go through this moment. We were going to have this initial spike because, hey, people are back to spending, saved a little bit of money. There was going to be a rush. We still have all the supply chain issues that haven't been resolved. And now what's going on in Ukraine is still part of it.
I don't even think that there is a demand component. I'm very strong on the fact that I think this is all supply side. So I think, and the reasons for this is I think that when you look at capacity utilization in the American economy, it's still not up to what it was before. We still have 1.5 million. It's diminishing, but we still have 1.5 million or something like that of workers that had a job before the pandemic and still don't have it. So I think that when you look at the things that are really behind this are fundamentally supply side issues, and at this point it's essentially the oil thing. So I don't think that it's people spending, and that's why I think that the Fed hiking the interest rates, and particularly if they go very high and very fast, it's a mistake. They're gonna basically get the economy into a recession, which doesn't help anybody. And on top of that, inflation will continue. So if they do that, it's the worst mistake that they can make. And I'm afraid that and it will hurt politically Biden. And again, it's out of his hands because the central bank is independent. The Fed does what the Fed decides to do. And I'm not saying the Fed is doing this to hurt workers, but their view is that demand inflation is, that demand pool is, it's part of the story, and that they have to slow down the economy. And I personally, that's my personal view. I don't think that that's a reasonable sort of understanding of what's happening with the economy, and hence it's the wrong solution. So solutions that are reasonable. So the using the oil reserves, a good thing. Going and negotiating with the Saudis and with Venezuela and with others, to see if OPEC can sort of put more oil in the market, good solution. But again, it's not like you can make those things happen. I mean, it's not something that Biden controls. I mean, he controls the reserves, but the impact that might have is, as he said when they sort of did that. I don't remember if it was last week or the previous one. We're talking cents on the pump. We're not talking a whole dollar or something like that. So we're not going to see huge changes. And so I would say encouragement of and helping unions and helping keep wages keep up with inflation. That's an important thing. Right. Having particularly solutions for the people that those that are going to be hurt the most in inflation, it's always the people at the bottom of this. So help them as we can. So extend things like, some of the pandemic policies that, were good for the people at the bottom. So, extending the relief for evictions, which it's gone, things like, helping with provisions for those that still don't have a job, helping with housing. Housing is, prices, it's one of the other things that have gone really up, and
student debt,
and it's going to be made worse by the hikes in interest rates and mortgage rates going up and so on and so forth. So there's a wealth of things that can be done for those that are hurting at the bottom. And to deal with inflation and the consequences of inflation, to stop inflation, I'm sorry to say, the only thing that will stop is when the oil prices, which have been the driver of this, stop. And at this point, it seems that it's a geopolitical thing, that it's out of anybody's hands, even. So it's not. So from that point of view, it's how you cope with inflation that matters more than being able to stop inflation. And that's going to be hard. So I would suggest that stopping demand because they think it's demand, it will add another problem. It will throw people, in the recession into unemployment, and would make compound the problems of inflation and bring us back really to the 70s. It will be, inflation and sort of stagnation, the monster of stagflation coming back, and that's a huge mistake.
I agree.
Politically, forget just economics. Politically, is a huge mistake. We have, it's a midterm election, and the stakes are very high. So
politically, this is all bad because the party in power is going to going to take a bloodbath over this because everybody's fixated on inflation because it's hurting everyone. And now a second ago you said this is a supply side problem. Now, can you flesh that out a bit? I've been saying, there was a call not too long ago with the oil executives saying that they're not going to increase production because they like the prices high because they're making more money so that they're able to, dole it out amongst their investors. So for me, as I'm hearing you say this is a supply side issue, this is producers saying we're not going to produce more to lower the prices because, hey, we like the prices high. So for me, this is corporate America going, good opportunity to cash in.
There are rents. So oil markets are rent markets. So this is it's a typical rent market, and so this price is going up. A lot of these rents go to Saudi princes, and they also go to it's an oligopolistic market with very few firms in this. So the reasons for and how you can sort of politically force them to produce more. It's both on the political side. So, whatever it's the name, and now I'm not going to remember the name of the Saudi sort of company, but it's a big national company over there. So that goes to the Saudi family at the end of the day. That's political. And to some extent, doing the same with corporations, it's political. It's hard to see, that the Biden administration would have a significant clout in order to change those things. That's why I said I think inflation will be with us. So it's more a question of what can be done to help people cope with it. I'm sorry to say, I think that's that, and also not add things, not throw the economy into recession. Mind you, it's all very difficult because even at this point, with the Senate supposedly in his hands, and with certainly the House in his hands, he cannot pass Build Back Better, and so the kinds of programs that are necessary to hold the people under these circumstances have been stalled by the more conservative senators and groups in the Democratic Party. Part of those, Manchin has received tons of money from the oil industry, and so that's part of a political problem, that it's brother for, I would say, Democrats, and inflation is just a tiny fraction of all of that.
No, you're absolutely right. For me, because in this moment, this would be the perfect time to go, you know what? Now's the time we invest in alternative energy to get off the juice so that we're not so dependent on oil. And whatever resource we have, we can use where we need it. And we go in a different direction for everything else. This seems like that moment. It seems like this moment where we could get people behind it. But politically, you just said it's all dead in the water at this moment.
It seems so, and again, I mean, that I would say any moment it's good to do that. We should have been doing that for the last 20 years. But my recollection of from the Clinton administration onwards, which I have I've been lived here in the United States, and I have also sort of more direct memories of all of those things. It has been always a fight of, they shut down the government with Clinton. They shut down the government with Obama. They shut down the government with not yet with Biden, but the Republican Party went from shutting the government down when the Democrats were there to wanted to shut it down when they had the presidency with Trump. So that's really a new one, and from that point of view, so it's really a complicated thing because they not only don't do anything that it's necessary when they're in the presidency, but then they shut down any possibilities of doing anything that it's sort of crucial, like investing in those energies. Mind you, short term, those things won't have an impact on inflation. So from the point of view of inflation and the midterms, I think more or less we might get lucky, and inflation sort of gets a little bit subdued from here till the end of the year, but it will be relatively high inflation. So I think that boat has sailed. So there'll have to be other issues in which this election will be sort of fought, and this will have implications for 2024. I'm sorry to say, and that's the part that I'm more concerned. So having a lame democratic government for 2 years is not the end of the world, but 2024 is looming closer, and I am concerned because I think that there are issues. Again, going beyond the economics of this, and I don't speak as an expert outside of that, but I think it brings issues of the future of democracy in the United States, and so those things are worth keeping in mind. That people, when they vote, they shouldn't just think about inflation. They should think about the future of the country.
No, I'm with you. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Mateus Venengo, professor of economics at Bucknell University, talking about inflation. Mateus, I wanted to get your thoughts on this other report that just came out, talking about the fact that life expectancy in this country has dropped an enormous amount over the pandemic. And I had someone email me this story, and again, there's been this look what Joe Biden's done kind of mentality. And, as I read through the story, it had nothing to do with Joe Biden, but we've gotten kind of into this, everything's Joe Biden's fault. The story really is about how bad our healthcare system is for a large number of people, how desperate our communities are, and how we've done such a poor job of dealing with deindustrialization in communities where poverty and desperation and drug abuse have taken over. And that is really what's been the driver of this massive age, the life expectancy drop. I mean, it was enormous. Like 2.26 years.
I think 2 years or something like that. I had a little. So now they've been reading because a study came out also, but the report actually, came at the end of last year. It's a significant drop. I'll say that the largest drop, more recent, is the pandemic, and also again we were unprepared. So there are two things I would say. One, you're right, we're unprepared. We in many ways, the healthcare system has problems. I should say in favor of what we did during the pandemic is that the federal government did get into and paid almost all of the expenses with the pandemic, so that people that were hospitalized were not paying the bills for that. Imagine if we had done something like that. And we did, again, I should say in favor, a good chunk of this was the Operation Warp Speed, funded by the government, people that think that the government cannot do anything right. The vaccines I got 4 shots of Moderna. Moderna is all funded by the government. From the research to the production to, all of that, significant amount of money from the government. And that was a success. So all of that is good. The problem is that we have a political problem in our hands. And again, a good chunk, so whatever it is, 7% of Americans are vaccinated. And so we have a third almost of the population that decided not to get vaccinated for political reasons. We have been less compliant with masks. People think that, masks and mandates are fascism, which is absolutely insane. So the notion that you're part of a community all of a sudden implies that you're, in a fascist state. And that has led to more deaths than we should have had. So there are a lot of people that died. And of course, the ones that die, people tend to forget this. The ones that die are workers, people that have to go and still work. And, they were not privileged, as I am. And, you can, as we are, and, get the things delivered to you, and you work from home, or, you work on Zoom or whatever it is. So these were people that had to go to the plants, work, meet packing plants and so on and so forth, and the numbers are higher, so they tended to be minority workers, and so on and so forth. So those numbers are the reason for the very sort of big drop more recently. But you're right, this is building on something that was coming from before: the deaths of despair, lack of jobs, lack of opportunities, excessive debt, so access to drugs, cheap drugs that were being pushed by corporations, as if there were a solution for problems, and they're really pushing drugs. And so we have suicides, we have, overdoses, and all of those things that, the United States does have, for its level of income per capita, a life expectancy that it's lower than it should be. And that's the result of those failed social policies.
Yeah. No, I just thought it was
interesting.
Hark back,
I should say, to Reagan. So it's not, so all of those, if you want to put a blame on somebody, it's not Biden. it's Reagan, Bush, and and so on and so forth, and there is some blame in, I would say, in part of the more neoliberal Democrats, but on this at least I should say Obama did reverse a trend that I always say you have to give Obama that. I'm critical of Obama in many respects, but I think he did bring back the idea that the state can do things, and they expanded, at least on health, the Obamacare did expand for the first time, going back to Nixon, and the EPA, for the first time, the expansion of the abilities of the state to do positively things for people. And so that was a positive, thing. But it's a long period in which the tendencies were all in the other direction.
Yeah. Good stuff. Mateus, I appreciate the time. As always, thanks so much for taking time for us.
Thank you.
As always, our good friend Mateus Fernango. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Gonna take a quick break right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. Generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Marcia. Tennessee Senator Marsha Blackburn yesterday, you just got to wonder. I know there's a lot of people who want to beat up on public education, and you got to wonder where Marsha went to school, because evidently Marsha tweeted out, Tennesseans, they want a wall. We want a wall on our southern border. Tennesseans want a wall on our southern border. So I guess they want to keep people from Alabama from coming to Tennessee? Is that what she's saying? Because I don't blame her. If I lived in Tennessee, I might want to not. There's some people in Alabama I don't want coming around. And to be honest, as I was thinking about it, can we get Tennessee to, build a moat around Tennessee so nobody gets out? Can you do that, Marsha? How about a big giant moat right around Tennessee so nobody can get out? You could just stay right in. Or I'll sell it to you this way. No one can get in. You could be safe in your insanity. And look, I know some really good people who live in Tennessee, and I would feel bad for them. Yes, I know some really great labor people there, and it would be horrible for them. But it would keep people like her away from the rest of us. Just a thought. A new piece out on Amazon. I had to get this out. This Amazon piece says that, now remember, Jeff Bezos last year said that Amazon was going to become Earth's safest workplace. They were going to be the safest place on Earth to work. But this new report out shows that, well, not so much. They have had a staggering increase in the number of injuries. In fact, 20% jump in the number of workers injured in Amazon facilities. And you go, how is that possible? In fact, as it's being reported, 40,000 injuries in 2021, despite employing just 33% of all warehouse workers in the U.S. Amazon is now responsible for nearly 50% of all injuries in the industry. And you got to go, I wonder why that is. Could it be the pace at which they force workers to work? Could it be, I don't know, ergonomics that they don't care about? Could it be, that they don't have worker unions that help protect workers on the job? Could it be a lot of that stuff? Answer, yes, could be. And, quite frankly, I do believe that it is. Just my thought. Love to hear yours. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1934. That was the day that workers at the Toledo Autolite factory decided to go on strike. The company made electric starters for the auto giants in nearby Detroit. The punishing effects of the Great Depression had hit the auto industry hard. Unemployment in the industrial city of Toledo soared. At the Autolite plant, workers faced increased scrutiny from their bosses, who knew hundreds of eager-to-work laborers stood at the ready just outside the plant's gate, ready to take the job of anyone who dared to complain. Philip Croth and Margaret Beagle recalled the working conditions in an oral history of the strike, saying, "Under observation, even into the toilets, workers found themselves sneaking a bite to eat or a puff of a cigarette, aware that they would be fired if discovered." One of the most hated practices by management was known as the bench. Workers were told to sit on a bench where they would wait until they were needed to perform a job. Once that job ended, they went back to the bench, being paid for only the time spent while working. Faced with such conditions, the workers had had enough and went out on strike. The company won an injunction that allowed only 25 workers to picket at any one location. But then something happened that the company had not expected. The Lucas County Unemployment League stood up with the picketers. Instead of taking the jobs of those on strike, the unemployed members of the league rallied to the picket lines in defiance of the injunction. In late May, picketers and the National Guard clashed in what became known as the Battle of Toledo. Finally, on June 2nd, the strike was settled. The workers had won a 5% raise and union recognition. Today's Labor History in 2 brought to you in memory of Carol Hillman, a passionate friend of workers and volunteer of the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
The opposite of courage is not cowardice, it's conformity. And right there's the problem with the big money establishment that now controls the National Democratic Party. This group certainly wants Democrats to be the majority party, but for what purpose? Based on the policies they actually push, they seek progress without change, only offering policy tweaks that conform to the existing corporate structure. Their idea of change is what near beer is to beer, only not so satisfying. Worse, when grassroots progressives put real FDR-style Big D Democratic ideas on the national agenda, the Dem hierarchy turns into a bunch of fraidy-cat Democrats, muling that a living wage law, health care for all, breaking up monopoly power, child care, strengthening unions, and other fundamental changes are too extreme. Such boldness, they cry, will frighten voters. They are, of course, wrong and politically inept. For such direct benefit, we're on your side changes in today's corporate-run system are the Democrats' most popular proposals. Polls confirm that this is especially true among working-class voters in manufacturing towns where Democrats have been getting creamed. Surveys by a group called American Family Voices show that these people don't think the party is too socialist or too woke, but too meek, too corporate, and missing in action. After all, they've seen CEOs move their decent-paying jobs out. They've watched monopolies and Wall Street squeeze the lifeblood out of family farm opportunities. They've witnessed Amazon and Walmart eating Main Street alive. Where, they ask, is the Democratic Party that once stood for us? These people actually despise big corporations, love unions, and yearn for a party that'll join them in battling the bastards. This is Jim Hightower saying, the question they have for Democrats is basic. Do you just intend to hold office or use it?
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So our good buddy Cyril Mikalenko over at the Bucks County Beacon's got a new piece out, and this is something we've been talking about, well, for some time now. This idea that we're gonna allow the right wing to ban a bunch of books and attack schools and destroy libraries. Pennsylvania, congratulations, my state of Pennsylvania. You're in second place. I know, working hard to get to number one, take on Texas. But as Cyril points out, the new Penn America piece gives PA the second spot jockeying for number one. They point out that across the districts here, over 456 books have been banned in 9 school districts. And they're saying, look, the big moneyed interests who are shoving this down our throats, this is a national movement of people who are trying to get parents all worked up to attack their public schools and hate their teachers. And I actually had someone tell me the other day that, the kindergarten teachers, they're indoctrinating our kids because they got an agenda. I'm going, I know kindergarten teachers. They're great people. They're not doing what you're saying. Do you know any of them? And the answer is no. And here to share some thoughts on, well, just how crazy this has gotten and maybe some thoughts behind why. I've asked Randy Weingarten to come talk with us. Randy is the president of the American Federation of Teachers, AFT.org, their website. Randy, thanks for taking time for us.
Of course.
So I'm seeing this report and this Penn America piece, not new. We've seen this stuff going on for some time now. We've heard politically the right wing spinning the CRT, this theory about race that, oh my God, it's critical, to get people all afraid and again, hating public education, hating their teacher, and not knowing why. Tell me what's going on.
So one of the architects of this, I'll use his own words. He was at one of these evangelical colleges a couple of weeks ago, and he said that all of this is about laying siege to the institutions, to sow distrust and uncertainty about schools because they want to privatize public education. So, and Bannon has said that, this is the way to win elections. It's the fear of the other, so they're using, something that demagogues have used for a long time, otherize people, create fear. But what they have this time that has never happened before is that they're doing it on the heels of a nationwide global pandemic that created great disruption for 2 years. So what they're doing is exploiting the fear and the anxiety of parents all across America, of people across America, about who only want their kids to have a normal, decent life. And instead of everybody joining together in America to get us out of the effects of the pandemic, to, get jobs back and infrastructure built and not only schools reopened, but really kids recovering. Instead of doing that, these right-wing ideologues are just trying to create fear and anxiety and anger, exploiting the fear that parents already have in order to win elections and end public education as we know it. It's unconscionable because they're using politics, creating intense, long-term, harmful, cruel, non-political ramifications.
Yeah, but here's the thing, Randy. And look, I've got 3 kids, 2 still in public school. I have another one that's now graduated and moving on. I know the teachers. We were active in our kids' schooling. We know them. None of the stuff that they're telling us happened. The stuff on CRT wasn't going on. The indoctrination that they're telling us is rampant. Nobody, and in fact, the people who are telling me that it's out there aren't experiencing it with their children. So there's this boogeyman that they've created that nobody is experiencing. And so what is it about us that we seem to believe this nonsense, even though we're not experiencing it? No, there's no experiencing it.
But let's just say this, you could see now from the data of what really happened in the Virginia election, and you just put your thumb on it, Rick, which is it wasn't parents that voted against Terry McAuliffe. It was seniors who got really scared about all of this fear-mongering that came out in droves against Terry McAuliffe. So this is a base vote strategy on the part of the Republicans. What we have to do is, and you see me as calmly as I can, the good news is this: parents don't buy it. 70 to 80% of parents know this is not what we're doing. We're not teaching, we're not indoctrinating, we're not grooming. We are actually teaching honest history, trying to help our kids recover, trying to deal with immense mental health needs, trying to teach kids knowledge so that they can discern fact from fiction. And most parents know that. What our goal has to be is that elections really matter this year. And hopefully people are going to be voting on these kind of issues for decency, for making sure that we can keep on doing what we're doing to help kids recover and help kids thrive. And that we have to be the aspiration agents against this attempt to, get us all into a terrible rabbit hole that's going to really hurt kids. Imagine if you had a trans kid right now, and you were in Texas, and you were trying to protect your kid, and the lieutenant governor was trying to bring you up on charges because you were protecting your kid. How is that parental rights? Imagine if you're a Jewish parent, son or daughter of a Holocaust survivor, and your district used to teach the book Mouse, which was about genocide. And all of a sudden your district is like, no, we can't teach that book. Why? Why can't we teach that book? Because it has, some one word in it that somebody's uncomfortable with. Well, genocide is pretty uncomfortable. Genocide in Ukraine right now is pretty uncomfortable. And isn't it better to actually teach kids within the safe and welcoming environment of a teacher who understands how to provide knowledge and pull knowledge out of kids, as opposed to seeing genocide on TV in Ukraine?
No, it's easier to put your head in the sand and know it doesn't happen and believe it's not happening. I've actually had people tell me that there's nothing going on over there. It's all computer graphics. It's not actually happening.
Yeah, well, it's the same. It's this notion. And look, we've been very lucky in America, and we in some ways live in a bubble for a long time. This is propaganda.
Yep.
This is misinformation. This is the way in which wars start. This is the way in which hatred starts. So part of what we try to do, this is why they go after educators. What we're trying to do is make sure that, we educate kids, we keep them safe, we keep them welcome, and we help them learn how to think, not what to think, but how to think, and have the tools so they can discern between fact and fiction. That scares the bejesus out of these extremists who don't want kids to know how to think. They don't want kids to empathize with the other, with people who may be different. But that is how America gets better. So it's a race. We are in an existential threat race against not only the effects of the pandemic, but also these right-wing extremists who are trying to exploit people's agitation for their own political purposes. That's why they're book banning. That's why they're going after the teaching of racism, the sexism, the Holocaust. That's why they are trying to silence and put back into the closet people who may be gay or trans.
Yeah, and that's why they're attacking teachers. And I look at this story. NBC News put out a story yesterday about this crackpot playwright David Mamet, who their tweet. Prize-winning playwright claims that teachers are inclined, quote, are inclined to pedophilia and that students are being groomed for sexual abuse while offering no evidence to back up his charges. I'm going, why would you even put this out? Why do we even address crackpots like this? How come we're not mocking idiots like this?
Because it's the capitalism of the media industry and how many clicks it gets. But think about how repulsive this is, a repulsive, terrible, heinous thing to say about the teaching profession. And this is what the extremists do. They actually say the opposite of who we are and what we represent. We care about kids. You have to see the school that I and Steve Barr and a few others founded this past Monday. This school, a school that we created 13 years ago, we had one of our kids get murdered by a gunman using a ghost gun on Friday afternoon as she left school. Murdered. What did the teachers do? So I saw what Mamet said. What did the teachers do on Monday and on Saturday before Monday? They HUD kids. They kept them safe. They listened to them. A kid in this class had died, and their teachers, the other kids' teachers, were there with them every day, every hour on Monday to help them survive this terrible tragedy. And then I saw what Mamet said. It's disgusting. It's denigrative, but it is done politically to create the wedge. Yeah. The way in which we fight it is we win politically. We don't let them create the wedge. We create the community between parents and teachers to help our kids. That's how we win.
Absolutely. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Randy Weingarten, president of the American Federation Teachers, AFT, AFT.org, their website, if you want to check out the work that they do. And you're right, there's so much that has to be done there because of these crackpots and this kind of stuff that just sucks the energy out of the room. The whole thing about the theory of race that's critical, this obscenity. We're not talking about gun violence. We're not talking about poverty. We're not talking about real abuse. We're not talking about any of those things. In fact, today in New York, another shooting on the subway. We're not talking about that stuff. We're talking about nonsense by some crackpot playwright. And that's a real problem for me.
Yeah, no, it is a real problem. But you know something? Today, we've been talking about gun violence in New York City and how to prevent it. And today, part of what I'm doing is supporting teachers who are teaching, supporting, parental engagement, and not letting these crackpots get us down a rabbit hole that they want to talk about instead of actually doing the hard work of helping our kids recover. And that's what our union is trying to do. But no doubt, let's just call it for what it is. They throw out, it's kind of like, when somebody calls fire in a crowded theater, they're trying to create fear. They're trying to create that sense, and you're seeing it more and more. And there's there doesn't seem to be any guardrails by these extremists, or frankly, I don't even call them conservatives, by these political operatives who just want to create this kind of fear.
No, they're just chaos merchants, and their goal is to spread fear and misinformation solely for, I believe, for their profit. There's no depths to their depravity, and there's no depths to where they'll go to make their aims. And this is the fear that I have of where we're at. And I'm hoping you're right. I'm hoping that good people come out and speak out and stand up and fight back. Now, I know you just came back from Poland, and I want to get to that before we go on, because, you know, I literally had someone tell me what's going on in Ukraine is not happening. It's all computer generated, and we're being lied to. But I'm telling you, some of the atrocities that I'm seeing on social media, and you know, as the president said, it's a genocide going on over there. I'm sure that you've got stories to share. I wanted to hear how your trip went and what you came across while you were in Poland.
Well, when you look in children's eyes and you hear their stories, you know that what Russia is doing, and Putin is doing in particular, is genocide. It's barbaric. And what's happened is, you know, you have, just like Trump did before, you have Russian propaganda in the United States that people just want to believe. And it is this kind of level of misinformation that's vile. We heard, you know, we saw a lot of kids while we were in Poland, a lot of Ukrainian kids, a lot of moms, because the dads are back fighting. And we heard their stories about, you know, the living a regular life until the middle of February, and then their whole worlds have been shattered. There are more kids who have been refugees in Poland from Ukraine than there are in the entire Los Angeles school system. So if nothing was happening there, why would all these people be leaving their homes? 4 million people leaving their homes, 2.5 million leaving through Poland alone. And so, you know, part of what we were trying to do is, you know, was just bear witness to what was going on, but also to bring toys and books and, you know, things that would make kids smile for a minute or so. But I'm going to leave you with, you know, one of the most impressive things to me, which was that the Poles, who have been victims of the Soviet Union, who are victims of Nazi atrocities, they have actually stood up for the Ukrainians. Everywhere you go in Warsaw, you see Ukrainian flags, you see signs for Ukraine, go Slava Ukraini, and all sorts of other kinds of sayings to kind of lift the spirits and the solidarity with Ukrainians. These are people, generations, that were victimized by others. And instead of victimizing the victims, they have embraced the victims. I'm sure that Putin wanted people to leave Ukraine in this kind of way to destabilize the rest of Eastern and Central Europe. That hasn't happened. What has happened, at least right now, is that the Ukrainians are fighting it every way they can to have their democracy back, to have their sovereignty back. And these kids who are the victims of this war, these kids are being embraced by the Poles in a way that's really, really beautiful. Yeah. One kid said to me, he stood up, I was in a classroom with him and with many of his peers. They're probably about 15, 16, 17 years old. And he says to me, please tell American children or students that I had what they have a month ago. Please tell them to be grateful for what they have. If that doesn't give you the kind of chills to march on and do what we need to do to save our democracy And to save our decency, I don't know what does.
Yeah, I think the lesson in that is right there. If there is something to be taken from it, it's that right there. Randy, I appreciate the time. I appreciate you taking a little time and sharing your story with us. I look forward to talking to you again.
Thanks, Rick. Take care.
Thanks so much. Randy Weingarten, president of the American Federation of Teachers, AFT.org, the website. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. There are some songs that stand at the core of the labor movement. Year after year, these songs ring out on picket lines, at labor rallies, and in union halls across the world. These songs inspire and build solidarity between workers. Undoubtedly, Which Side Are You On is one of those songs. On this day in labor history, the year was 1900. Today, we celebrate the birthday of Florence Reese, the author of Which Side Are You On's iconic labor lyrics. She was born in Tennessee, the daughter of a coal miner. During the 1930s, her husband Sam was an organizer for the United Mine Workers in Harlan County, Kentucky. In what came to be known as the Harlan County Wars, the battle for Union recognition waged on for nearly a decade. Often, violent skirmishes broke out between striking miners and federal troops, and the mine owners hired guns. Legend has it that one fateful day in 1931, deputies were dispatched to kill Sam Reese. He escaped just in the nick of time. But Florence and her children were terrorized as the deputies illegally searched and ransacked their home. When the deputies left, an angry Florence ripped the calendar off the kitchen wall and on it wrote the lyrics to Which Side Are You On? Folk singer Pete Seeger heard the song, and in 1941 he recorded it with his group, the Almanac Singers. It entered into the lexicon of labor anthems. Then, in 1976, Florence appeared in the Oscar-winning documentary Harlan County, USA. The documentary told the story of a 1970s coal strike. In it, Florence sang her song, and the lyrics provided a powerful addition to the film. Since then, many more artists have covered versions of the song, including Annie DeFranco, Natalie Merchant, and this version by the Dropkick Murphys. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. And look, I listened to the story that Randy told. And look, the lesson there, for me anyway, is, look at how hard these people are fighting for their rights. Look at how hard the people there are fighting for freedom, for democracy, for self-determination. Things we, like this kid said, I had what you had. Don't take it for granted. And we're in a moment where, you look around, you look at the moneyed interest that are organizing in interesting ways, pushing down our throats some really divisive and hateful kind of rhetoric. And this book banning stuff is just a small part of it. A very small part. And look, a lot of these books, there are 456 books that were banned in these 9 school districts. I guarantee you, a handful of kids in those districts, maybe 5 or 6, read a couple of those at best. There were books in the libraries when I was a kid that nobody ever touched. They were there for years. They never got taken off the shelves. But because this movement now is to scare, and I think Randy's spot on right. This was about scaring Granny. This was about getting that old guy all riled up. They're teaching children stuff. And, get off my lawn. That guy. They're feeding that outrage he needs. They're giving him, the chaos merchants are giving him the outrage candy he needs to be able to, to get all excited. And what's happening? Well, they're going to the polls and they're voting for the most insane characters they can get their votes around. And for you and me and the rest of us, the sane, the rational, that means trouble politically, because with those chaos merchants come lots of bad policies, come lots of trouble, come privatization of education so that the wealthy control what we see, hear, and read. And we don't want too much critical thinking because it'll spoil you for work. Troubling times ahead, folks. Troubling times. If you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast, or wherever you get your podcasts, from iHeart to iTunes, Apple, any of the things, iHeart, Stitcher, Podbean, everywhere in between. You can also email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Thanks for being here.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.